Hi everybody, this is Stephen Pugh, the City and Guilds Carpentry and Joinery course. We're going to continue with our studies in second fix operations, and in particular we're looking at skirting today. And the particular method of fixing skirting on an internal corner. Now, on an internal corner, the scribing is the traditional way in which skirting is cut on the inside corner. And the reason for this is if it's a mitre, then the mitre will open, and when it opens it leaves a clear space, which looks very unsightly, and it's not a great thing. However, with a mitre, with a scribe, because the scribe is passing it, if the timbers shrink a little, they slide past each other, and that's really the secret to doing a scribing on the internal corner of skirting. And of course they can look very tidy and they can look very sweet. So the mitre on the inside is by far the best method. Most of you have had a go of this in the workshop, so I don't need to go into great detail here, but just to remind you that the first thing we do is we take and we put the whole skirting on the one side. That's the easiest thing. The next one then that comes against it has a mitre cut, and that mitre cut then is taken and there's a vertical cut down until we get to the point where the moulding starts, and at that point we snap it off, and then we take a coping saw and we cut down that curve on where the mitre is cut. If we do it carefully and we do it right, then eventually what happens is it goes over it and will fit perfectly to the shape. That's what's called a scribe. Now, occasionally we need to do what's called a compass scribe, and the reason for this is because sometimes we're doing skirting that's going against previous skirting. And the previous skirting may not actually be upright. It may be at an angle, maybe forward or back or whatever. And so this time we bring the skirting up against it, and we take a compass with a pencil in it, and we scribe down the shape, and then we cut along that with either with an ordinary saw or with a coping saw. And then whatever the shape is, this then will always fit over at the correct position. So that's a slightly different version of scribing, and amazingly that is needed more than people realize. It's amazing how that method is needed more. Some people use a little profile gauge, which is like a special device that has lots and lots and lots of little spines in it, very fine, and I should push it over the shape of the timber so that the little spines push back to the same shape as what the scribe is. So that's a little tool that's quite handy when doing this. There's also what's called a false mitre. A false mitre is where, say you've got a bullnose skirting, you cut the one with a vertical cut set back, and then you cut and you take it up to the top, and then you do a scribe on the one, and then on the other one you do a scribe just so far down, and the two little mitres come together. Okay, so this isn't something that I'm familiar with, and something that I'm not really I haven't seen in the industry very much, but it's something that does exist, and some people do that method. On an external mitre, it's a very simple thing. It's just a 45-degree angle, but that may need to have to be adjusted occasionally if the angle is greater than 90 degrees or less than 90 degrees. That sometimes is what needs to happen. But whatever, the main thing is the ultimate finish needs to be a clean mitre, glued and pinned, and nice and clean. An angle that's more than 90 is called obtuse, and an angle that's less than 90 is called acute. Okay. Now, some people need to ask the question: how do you manage to bisect the angle on an obtuse angle, something that's more than 90? Well, it's the same if it's acute as to whether it's obtuse. What you do, and I'm going to show you the picture in the book here, because this is a beautiful little picture of how this works. You'll see, okay, you'll see that the using a little bit of scrap of timber, the floor is actually marked And when that floor is marked, this enables you to bisect the angles. So a piece of timber across one way, the same piece of timber away, produces a cross shape, and then from the corner across to that cross would be the angle for an obtuse angle. And then of course the mitre is cut in the normal way, and it's cut to fit exactly so that they are complete. There's a couple of other things that we need to do. We also need to mention that sometimes skirting is in a very long room and has to be joined as you're going down the wall. This does occur from time to time, and in situations like that, it's always a mitre on the one and a mitre on the other one. A little bit of glue between the two and little pins to actually join them together. It's very important that they come together really quite flush. It's very important they have glue. This will need to have some time to set, and it will then need to be filled in with filler. And when skirting reaches the end of a run, for example, let's suppose you're taking skirting along to the top of a staircase, and then you just need to basically stop the skirting. Well, you don't just cut it flush. What you do is you cut it at an angle and then down, and you take a little piece of that top section and put it facing so that the details that come along at the top turn and go downwards, and that completes skirting at the end of a run. As for fixing skirting, well, there's lots of different things that we can use for fixing. First of all, we can use nails. The most common method of fixing is nails. They tend to be lost heads or ovals, or the nail gun is used. I have a little air-powered nail gun, which is very powerful. It'll take a 3-inch nail beautifully straight into the timber. They're what I call needle nails, so they're very fine. They can hardly be seen. So nailing is very good. Masonry nails occasionally, if you're going into masonry. If you're going to go into masonry, then really you need to be switching to screws in the main, and there's a huge selection of screws available. What I tend to do when I'm fixing skirting is it's the same as if I'm fixing a lot of things in a house, is I will use the combination of a brown plug, a number 8 screw that's 4 inches long, and a number 7 SDS drill, which again is 4 inches long. And I'll put the skirting against the wall, take the SDS drill and go straight through the timber and into the wall, right the way down to the base of the drill. Then I'll take the whole thing out, put a brown plug on that hole, tap it in with a hammer until it's on the surface, then put a screw onto it, and then tap the screw down. And what the screw will do is it'll push that brown plug right into the center of the brickwork. And then just a couple of turns with a screwdriver and it's done. Sometimes when you're doing a thing like this, yes, you have to have SDS, but you don't need to have lots of screwdriver bits. Just an ordinary screwdriver in my hand is perfectly adequate. Occasionally, we'd have to screw onto dry line surfaces, or we may have to screw onto framing. If that's the case, then small screws straight into the timber is going to be fine. If you're going into steel studs, then you might want to use a small self-tapping screw, which is counterbore and fixed straight through. And also another way of doing this is to use panel adhesive. Now, people talk about grab adhesives. What we're talking about is a panel adhesive. A panel adhesive is an adhesive that comes in a tube, and it is when you squeeze it, it's a long flexible line. It doesn't skin very easily, and it has a slow setting time. And the point of that is you can squeeze it on. A lot of these glues, as soon as they come out of the container, they skin immediately, and they don't want that. You want something that still retains a bit of tackiness. So you put it onto the timber, put it onto the wall, take it back off again. Just give it a couple of seconds until it does start to skin over a little bit, and then pop it back on again, and it will grab it immediately, and virtually impossible to take it away. So nails and screws need to be positioned anything between 400 to 600 centers in pairs, ideally, top and bottom. But you don't have to do exactly like that. Sometimes when I'm fixing skirting, if it's very good plaster work and I'm fixing it to timber, I literally just put one pin straight in. I normally put it in an angle straight down. If it's skirting, I'll push the skirting right down tight and one straight down like that, and it will actually knit straight into the wall. it's absolutely fine. Preparation prior to putting skirting on. The most important thing is that the walls are all clean. Make sure that the plaster work is actually not curving. Okay, if it is, give it a tap. It's better to take off a bit of plaster, take off the snots as they call it. Better to take off plaster than have your timber going in at an angle because of the unevenness of the wall. Electricity cables, gas cables, water cables, sorry, water pipes, gas pipes, not cables, gas pipes, all these services, you need to really make sure you locate them. You don't want to be popping a screw straight into electric. That would cause a big accident. Scribing and fixing skirting to the floor. Yeah, sometimes, occasionally, you may have to put skirting scribed to the shape of the floor. Sometimes floors are uneven. Sometimes you might be working in a very old building. If it's a very old building and the floorboards are all misshaped, you will need to follow this. You will need to follow the floorboards to their shape. So there's a lot of scribing to be done in a situation like that. Now, people talk about the order in which you do skirting. I don't really. People talk about the order in which you put skirting in to do with whether the scribe is something that can be seen when you're walking into a room or whether it can't be seen. And I personally, I don't worry about all that. What I worry about is this. I want to be doing it quickly. I want to be doing it very, very efficiently. Now, I'm a right-handed person. So when I walk into a room, I want to start on the left, do the first straight cut, and the next cut will be the fine cut. It'll either be a straight or a scribe. The next cut, again, I'll do the first cut on the left, and then I'll do the fine cut on the right. And I will go around the room from left to right, simply because I'm right-handed. If you're left-handed, you might want to go around the other way. Oh, just as a matter of course, when I'm talking about skirting like this, the way in which I normally price skirting is that I go into a room, and in this room, for example, I will number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of skirting, and I will give myself 10 minutes to do each piece. And I find that that is normally perfectly adequate time. The longer the piece is, the easier it is to do because it's much more forgiving. Tiny little pieces can be quite fiddly and can take a lot of time. And some pieces are very quick. You might do it in 5 minutes, but another piece might take you another extra 5 minutes. So, but on average, I can go into a room, count the skirtings. If there's 15, I put a nought on the end, and that will tell me how many minutes it's going to take me to do the job. There's another little trick that we can have on this. We can have what's called a kneeling board, which is just a piece of timber, and you actually just put it on the surface of on the top surface of the skirting, and then you just put your knee on it, and it presses down, and it gets the skirting down to the floor. If you're working on lots of curved surfaces, that's rather tricky. And what we do with that, we get a small tennis saw, and we do a series of curve cuts on the back of the timber, sufficient enough so that the timber can be slowly bent around the curve. Dado and picture rails don't do a lot of this anymore, but certainly they do occur from time to time. And I recommend that if you're doing dado, one screw in the center, straight through the main body of the dado, straight in, brown plug, 4-inch screw, number 7 SDS, bang, finished, gone, everything done. Picture rails, a little bit more tricky. I tend to go through the main body of the picture rail rather than on the top or the bottom or anything like that, because I want it to hold it really well. When you put picture rails up, you'll discover that people will want to hang things from them. So if they're going to be hanging from your picture rails, you need them to be secured very securely. So that's my little tip. Good, well, we'll catch up with you on the next installment. This one's going to be about installing service casements and cladding. So we'll catch up with you then. Have a nice day. See you later. Bye for now.